As you probably know, this channel is all about making Jewishness personal. In fact, on this channel, we have a Jewish film club where we look at movies that depict Jewishness in depth, or we pick a topic about Jewishness and see how it's depicted in film. One thing that I noticed by watching dozens of movies about Jewishness is that the graveyard has become an icon of Jewishness on screen. Let me give you some examples. Recently, there was a movie called An American Pickle, which theme is all about processing grief. In particular, the main characters, Herschel and Ben, disagree and clash on how they want to actually process the loss of their family members.
But now we go to shul, we say Mourner's Kaddish, prayer for dead. Must properly honor memory of Sarah, Mort, your parents.
Herschel in particular wants to restore the actual cemetery and clean it up and make it look nice in order to honor the memory of those buried there. Another example of where the cemetery is front and center in a story, particularly about the grief and loss, is the movie Menashe, where, like Ben and Herschel, he finds this dynamic where he's trying to process the loss of his wife in a way that is different than what's expected by those around him. This theme carries over to a third movie called Loving Leah, where one of the opening scenes takes place at a funeral. And that movie also focuses on the idea of processing loss and finding one's own way in their Jewishness. But funerals and burial process is actually something that's featured prominently in film as well, most notably in Yentl, where her father passes away. She leads the funeral service over his grave.
Who will say Kaddish?
I will. It has to be a man, Yentl, a male relative.
Which obviously foreshadows the theme of the movie at large. And in Miller's Crossing, there's a moment where there is a prayer for the dead recited over a grave known as the Kaddish. The Kaddish is an interesting prayer which basically sanctifies God, but by reciting it in the memory of the deceased, it helps elevate their soul, and it's supposed to be a merit to their memory. Although in practice, you probably won't find people saying Kaddish unless there are 10 men present. There's also something known as the Yahrzeit, which is the anniversary day of someone's passing that is seen as an auspicious time to invoke their memory. This is a big part of the movie Menashe, as well as in the movie Brighton Beach Memoirs, where the main character Eugene and his family members go to visit the grave of his uncle. Another example of the Jewish grave being an iconic symbol in a movie is, of course, the Dybbuk. There's actually several different graves. First off, there's a grave in the center of the town that belongs to a young couple that was murdered while they were getting married. And so they were buried together in the center of town, and the tradition became that couples who were about to get married would go to this grave on the day of their wedding in order to invite the souls of these two young people who were cut down in this moment of happiness, to invite them to their happy day in order to celebrate with them. And you see that in the movie. And then later on, the main character, Leah, on the day of her wedding, goes to the grave of her mother in order to invite her soul to her wedding, which is a tradition that some Jewish communities keep, as well as going to the grave of the boy she was in love with, named Hanan, and inviting his soul to her wedding, which of course causes him to possess her, which is the title of the movie called The Dybbuk. Another example of possession is a more recent movie known as To Dust. It opens with this man losing his wife, and it showcases many of the rituals that are associated with that life cycle event. Also, the movie has this idea of possession where the main character Shmuel becomes obsessed with the body of his wife in her grave, and his children begin to think that he is possessed by the spirit of his late wife. And finally, the graveyard can be a place of closure. For example, in the movie's American Tale, it ends at the graveyard when Herschel and Ben finally reconcile. In Menashe, it's a place of contemplation where we see him find closure for his grief and move on and become a mensch. In Loving Leah, when Leah figures out her life, she comes back to the cemetery to reconcile with her late husband. And in the movie Everything is Illuminated, we actually get to see two parallel moments of closure in the graveyard. The Ukrainian characters get their moment, as well as the American character gets his moment with the grandfather he started the movie with. And there's a very similar moment in the movie Disobedience, where the main character, Ronit, before she leaves her childhood community, she takes a moment to find closure at the grave of her father. So hopefully at this point you can see how cemeteries, graveyards, burial sites, whatever you want to call them, play a huge role in Jewishness. In the meantime, if you're interested in Jewish history, culture, and art, then you, my friend, you're in the right place. My name is David, and welcome to Yiddishkeit.